Sarah Martinez stared at the cream-colored invitation in her trembling hands, reading the elegant script for the fifth time. Westfield High School Class of 2014, 10-year reunion. The words seemed to mock her from the expensive cardstock, bringing back memories she had spent a decade trying to forget. She stood in the modest kitchen of her small apartment, the fluorescent light casting harsh shadows across her face. At 28, Sarah had grown into her features, but the scars of her teenage years ran deeper than any physical transformation could heal. Her long black hair fell in waves past her shoulders, and her dark eyes held a strength that hadn't existed when she walked those high school halls. The invitation had arrived 3 days ago, forwarded through 2 different addresses before finding her. Sarah had moved frequently over the years, always seeking something better, always running from the ghosts of her past. But somehow, they had found her. She remembered Jennifer Walsh, the reunion committee chairwoman whose name appeared at the bottom of the invitation. Perfect Jennifer with her perfect blonde hair and perfect cheerleader smile. Jennifer who had made Sarah's life a living hell for 4 long years. The same Jennifer who had orchestrated the cruel pranks, the public humiliations, the systematic destruction of any confidence Sarah might have possessed. Sarah closed her eyes and was immediately transported back to that terrible day in senior year when Jennifer and her friends had convinced the entire cafeteria to throw food at her. She could still hear the laughter, still feel the sticky remnants of chocolate milk dripping from her hair. The worst part wasn't the mess or even the humiliation. It was the way the teachers had looked away, pretending not to see what was happening to the girl everyone called the class reject. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text message from an unknown number. Sarah's heart sank as she read it. "Hey Sarah, so excited you got the invitation. Can't wait to see what the class reject has been up to all these years. Hope you can make it. It wouldn't be the same without our favorite punching bag. Zoxo." Jen, Sarah's hands shook as she set the phone down. Even after 10 years, Jennifer Walsh could reduce her to that scared, lonely teenager with just a few words. The message was followed by several others from numbers she didn't recognize, but names she remembered all too well. "Remember when you used to eat lunch in the bathroom? Those were the days. Bet you're still living in that trailer park. Some things never change. Can't wait to see if you finally learned how to dress yourself properly." Each message felt like a physical blow. Sarah sank into her kitchen chair, the invitation crumpling slightly in her grip. She had worked so hard to build a new life, to become someone different from that broken girl who had graduated last in her class with no friends, no prospects, and no hope. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was how much Sarah Martinez had changed in the years since graduation. The scared girl who had cowered in bathroom stalls and eaten lunch alone was gone, replaced by someone stronger, more determined, and infinitely more capable than any of them could imagine. Sarah's transformation hadn't happened overnight. It had taken years of struggle, sacrifice, and an incredible stroke of fate that had changed the trajectory of her entire life. After graduation, while her former classmates headed off to college or started their careers, Sarah had been working 3 jobs just to help her single mother pay rent on their tiny apartment. She remembered those early days vividly. Mornings at the diner serving coffee to truckers and construction workers, afternoons cleaning offices, and evenings stocking shelves at the grocery store. The work was exhausting, but it had given her something she'd never had in high school: respect. Her bosses appreciated her reliability, her work ethic, and her quiet determination to always do better. It was during one of those late-night shifts at the grocery store that Sarah's life had taken its first major turn. A customer had collapsed in aisle 7, clutching his chest and gasping for air. While other shoppers stood frozen in panic, Sarah had immediately dropped to her knees beside the man, checking his pulse and loosening his collar. She had learned basic first aid from a free community center class, one of many she attended in her spare time, always hungry for knowledge and new skills. The man survived his heart attack, and his grateful family had insisted on learning more about the young woman who had potentially saved his life. It turned out that the man, Robert Chun, was a retired military medic who had served multiple tours overseas. As he recovered, he and Sarah had struck up an unlikely friendship. She would visit him in the hospital during her breaks, and he would tell her stories of his time in the service. Robert had seen something in Sarah that she hadn't even known existed, a natural ability to remain calm under pressure, to think clearly in crisis situations, and to care for others even when no one had ever truly cared for her. He had suggested she consider a career in emergency medicine or military service, but Sarah had laughed off the idea. Girls like her didn't become doctors or soldiers. Girls like her were lucky to have jobs at all. But Robert had been persistent. He had introduced her to other veterans, shared stories of people who had overcome far worse circumstances than hers, and slowly began to plant seeds of possibility in Sarah's mind. When he learned about her high school experience, his expression had grown serious. "You know what I learned in the military?" he had asked one afternoon as they sat in his hospital room. "The people who survive and thrive aren't the ones who had it easy. They're the ones who learned to be tough when life tried to break them. You've already proven you're a survivor, Sarah. Now you need to decide if you want to be more than that." Those words had echoed in Sarah's mind for weeks. She began researching military careers, reading about the opportunities available to people without college degrees, learning about the training and education the service could provide. The more she learned, the more excited she became about the possibility of a different future. But it was another chance encounter that had truly changed everything. Sarah had been walking home from her evening shift when she witnessed a car accident at the intersection near her apartment. A drunk driver had slammed into a family sedan, and the scene was chaos. Without thinking, Sarah had rushed to help, using the first aid skills Robert had taught her to stabilize a young child who had been thrown from the vehicle until paramedics arrived. One of the paramedics, a woman named Lieutenant Maria Santos, had been impressed by Sarah's quick thinking and calm demeanor. As they waited for the helicopter to transport the injured family to the trauma center, Maria had asked about Sarah's background and training. When she learned that Sarah was just a grocery store clerk with some basic first aid knowledge, Maria had stared at her in amazement. "You have natural instincts for this work," Maria had said. "Have you ever considered becoming a paramedic or joining the military medical corps?" That conversation had led to several meetings with military recruiters. Sarah had learned about opportunities she never knew existed, paths to education, and training that could transform her life completely. The idea of serving her country while gaining valuable skills and education appealed to her on multiple levels. It would give her purpose, direction, and, most importantly, a chance to become someone entirely different from the girl her former classmates remembered. The decision to enlist hadn't been easy. Her mother had been terrified at the thought of her daughter going into military service, especially given the ongoing conflicts around the world. But Sarah had been determined to change her life, to prove to herself and everyone else that she was capable of more than anyone had ever imagined. She had spent months preparing for basic training, running every morning before work, studying military procedures and protocols, and mentally preparing herself for the challenges ahead. Robert had become her unofficial mentor, sharing tips and strategies from his own military experience. He had also helped her understand that her difficult past could actually be an asset in military service. "The military breaks people down and builds them back up stronger," he had explained. "But you've already been broken down by life. You know how to endure hardship, how to keep going when things get tough. That's going to give you an advantage over recruits who've never faced real adversity." The day Sarah left for basic training had been both terrifying and exhilarating. She had stood at the bus station with her single bag of belongings, looking back at the life she was leaving behind. The apartment where she had struggled to make ends meet, the jobs that barely paid enough to survive, the memories of high school that haunted her dreams. All of it was disappearing in the rearview mirror as the bus pulled away. Basic training had been everything she had expected and more. The physical challenges pushed her body to its limits, but years of hard labor had already built a foundation of strength and endurance. The mental challenges tested her ability to follow orders, work as part of a team, and maintain focus under extreme pressure. But, perhaps most importantly, basic training had given her something she had never experienced before, a sense of belonging. For the first time in her life, Sarah was part of something bigger than herself. Her fellow recruits came from all walks of life, and many had their own stories of struggle and hardship. The drill sergeants didn't care about her past or her social status. They only cared about her ability to complete the mission and support her team. It was a meritocracy based on performance and character rather than popularity or family background. Sarah had excelled in her medical training, displaying the same natural instincts that had impressed Robert and Maria. She learned advanced first aid, trauma treatment, and emergency medical procedures. Her instructors noted her exceptional composure under pressure and her genuine care for the well-being of others. By the time she graduated from basic training, Sarah Martinez was no longer the scared girl from Westfield High School. She was a soldier, a medic, and a woman with purpose. Now, sitting in her kitchen holding the reunion invitation, Sarah reflected on how far she had come. The past 10 years had been a whirlwind of training, deployment, and service. She had saved lives, comforted the dying, and proven herself time and again in the most challenging circumstances imaginable. The shy girl who had once hidden in bathroom stalls had evolved into a confident woman who could perform emergency surgery in a combat zone while under enemy fire. But her former classmates didn't know any of that. To them, she would always be the class reject, the girl they had tormented for their own amusement. The cruel text messages proved that their opinion of her hadn't changed, even after all these years. They expected to see the same broken girl they remembered, and they were planning to humiliate her all over again for their entertainment. Sarah looked at her reflection in the darkened window, seeing not the scared teenager from her memories, but the strong, capable woman she had become. She thought about her Apache helicopter, currently undergoing routine maintenance at the base. That magnificent machine represented everything she had accomplished, everything she had overcome to reach this point in her life. The Apache was her partner, her weapon, and her proof that Sarah Martinez was no longer a victim. She was a warrior, a protector, and someone who commanded respect through her actions rather than begging for acceptance through submission. The helicopter was more than just a military asset. It was a symbol of her transformation and her power. A slow smile spread across Sarah's face as she set the invitation down on the counter. Jennifer Walsh and her friends thought they were setting up another humiliation, another chance to relive their glory days by tearing down someone they perceived as weak. But they had no idea what they were really inviting. Sarah picked up her phone and began typing a response to Jennifer's cruel message. Her fingers moved with the same steady precision she used when flying her Apache through hostile territory. Hi Jen, thanks for thinking of me after all these years. I've been busy, but I think I can clear my schedule for the reunion. Looking forward to catching up with everyone and showing them what I've been up to. See you soon. She hit send and set the phone aside, her smile growing wider. Jennifer and the others expected the class reject to show up and provide them with entertainment at her expense. Instead, they were about to meet Chief Warrant Officer Sarah Martinez, Apache pilot and decorated combat veteran. The reunion was going to be far more interesting than any of them anticipated. Sarah stood up and walked to her bedroom, where her dress uniform hung in the closet. The ribbons and medals told the story of her service, her sacrifices, and her achievements. Each one represented a challenge overcome, a life saved, or a mission completed. Together, they painted a picture of a woman who bore no resemblance to the frightened girl her classmates remembered. Tomorrow, she would call her commanding officer and request permission to attend her high school reunion. She had accumulated plenty of leave time, and she suspected her request would be approved without question. Her service record spoke for itself, and her reputation as one of the finest Apache pilots in her unit was well established. But, more importantly, tomorrow she would begin planning her entrance to the reunion. It wouldn't be enough to simply show up in uniform and surprise everyone. Sarah wanted to make a statement, to demonstrate just how completely she had transformed her life. She wanted her former tormentors to understand that their victim had become something they could never imagine or achieve. The class reject was dead, buried somewhere between basic training and her first combat deployment. In her place stood a woman of strength, purpose, and undeniable accomplishment. Jennifer Walsh and her friends had invited Sarah to their reunion expecting to find a broken woman they could mock and humiliate. Instead, they were about to meet someone who could rain hell from the sky and had the training, authority, and firepower to back up any challenge they might offer. Sarah Martinez was going to her high school reunion, but she wasn't going alone. She was bringing her Apache with her, and she was going to show everyone exactly what the class reject had become. The scared girl was gone forever, replaced by a warrior who feared nothing and no one. The reunion was going to be unforgettable, but not for the reasons Jennifer and her friends expected. As Sarah turned off the lights and headed to bed, she was already visualizing her arrival at the reunion. Her former classmates had no idea what was coming their way, but they were about to learn that some people don't just survive their traumatic pasts. They use them as fuel to become something extraordinary. The class reject was about to become the class revelation, and the transformation was going to shock everyone who thought they knew Sarah Martinez. Sarah woke before dawn the next morning, her internal military clock pulling her from sleep at 0500 hours, just as it had for the past 8 years. The reunion invitation still lay on her kitchen counter where she had left it the night before, but now it looked different in the morning light, less like a threat and more like an opportunity. She made her coffee with the same precise routine she followed every morning, measuring the grounds exactly and timing the brew to perfection. Military life had taught her that discipline in small things led to excellence in large ones, and Sarah had embraced this philosophy completely. As she sipped her coffee and watched the sun rise through her window, she began mentally planning the logistics of her reunion appearance. The first call she made was to her commanding officer, Colonel James Harrison. Sarah had served under Harrison for 3 years, and he knew her service record better than almost anyone. He also knew about her background, having read her file when she first requested assignment to his unit. Harrison had been impressed not just by her technical skills as a pilot, but by her journey from civilian nobody to elite aviator. Martinez, Harrison answered on the second ring, his voice crisp despite the early hour. "Good morning, sir." Chief Warrant Officer Martinez requesting permission to speak. "Go ahead, Martinez. What's on your mind?" Sarah took a deep breath. "Sir, I'm requesting a 4-day leave to attend my 10-year high school reunion. I have accumulated sufficient leave time, and there are no upcoming missions that would conflict with the dates." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Harrison was undoubtedly checking her record and considering her request. "High school reunion, huh? That's not usually your style, Martinez. You planning something special?" Sarah couldn't help but smile. Harrison knew her well enough to sense when she had something more than a simple social gathering in mind. "You could say that, sir. I'd also like to request permission for a demonstration flight over the reunion venue. Nothing elaborate, just a standard flyover to show some hometown pride." Harrison chuckled. "Ah, now I understand. Your classmates don't know about your current career, do they?" "No, sir. They remember me quite differently than I am now." "I bet they do. Tell you what, Martinez, not only is your leave approved, but I'm also approving your flyover request. You've earned the right to show off a little. Just make sure you follow all regulations and file the proper flight plan." "Thank you, sir. I won't let you down." "You never do, Martinez. Have fun shocking the hell out of your old classmates." After ending the call with Harrison, Sarah began the more detailed planning phase of her operation. She had 3 weeks to prepare, and she intended to use every moment wisely. This wouldn't just be a simple appearance. It would be a carefully orchestrated demonstration of her transformation. Her first stop was the Westfield Airport, about 20 miles from her old high school. Sarah drove out that afternoon to assess the facility and speak with the airport manager. She introduced herself as a military pilot interested in coordinating with local authorities for a training exercise that would culminate in a flyover of her hometown. The airport manager, a former Air Force mechanic named Dave Collins, was immediately enthusiastic about the prospect. "We don't get many military aircraft through here," he said, walking with Sarah around the small terminal. "The community would love to see an Apache up close. You think you might be able to do a static display?" Sarah smiled. "That's exactly what I was hoping for. I'd like to land here the day of my reunion and allow local residents to tour the aircraft. It would be good community relations for the military." Dave's eyes lit up. "That would be incredible. We could advertise it, maybe get the local news involved." "When's your reunion?" 3 weeks from Saturday. The reunion itself is at the Marriott downtown, but I was thinking we could do the display here in the afternoon before people head to the evening event." "Perfect. I'll start making arrangements on my end. We'll need to coordinate with local law enforcement for crowd control, but that shouldn't be a problem. Everyone loves seeing military hardware up close." As Sarah drove home, she reflected on how different her life had become. 10 years ago, She couldn't have imagined coordinating with airport officials or planning military demonstrations. She had gone from someone who couldn't even eat lunch without being harassed to someone who commanded respect from seasoned aviation professionals. Over the following week, Sarah worked on multiple aspects of her reunion plan. She contacted the local newspaper and offered them an exclusive interview about a hometown girl who had become a military pilot. The editor, Mary Rodriguez, was immediately interested, especially when Sarah mentioned she would be bringing her Apache helicopter to town. "This is exactly the kind of positive military story we love to feature," Mary said during their phone conversation. "Would you be willing to do a photo shoot with the helicopter? Maybe talk about your journey from local girl to Army aviator." "I'd be happy to," Sarah replied. "Though I should mention that not everyone from my high school class knows about my current career. The reunion might be the first time some of them learn about my transformation." Mary laughed. "Oh, this keeps getting better. A hometown surprise at the class reunion. Can we cover that too?" Sarah considered the request. Having media coverage of her reunion appearance would certainly add to the impact of her revelation. "I don't see why not. Just remember that some of my classmates might not be prepared for what they're going to see. That's what makes it such a great story." Sarah's next call was to her former mentor, Robert Chen. She had maintained contact with him over the years, updating him on her career progress and thanking him for the guidance that had changed her life. When she told him about the reunion and her plans, he was quiet for a long moment. "You know," he finally said, "there's a difference between proving yourself and seeking revenge. Make sure you know which one you're doing." His words gave Sarah pause. "What do you mean?" "I mean that the woman you've become doesn't need validation from people who treated you badly in high school. You've already proven your worth through your service and accomplishments. Don't diminish that by making this about them instead of about celebrating who you are now." Robert's wisdom resonated with Sarah in a way she hadn't expected. He was right. Her motivation shouldn't be about getting back at her former tormentors. It should be about sharing her success and inspiring others who might be struggling the way she once had. The reunion was an opportunity to show that transformation was possible, that someone's past didn't have to define their future. With that perspective in mind, Sarah began planning her reunion speech. She knew she would likely be asked to address her classmates, especially once they learned about her military career. Instead of focusing on the pain they had caused her, she decided to talk about the journey she had taken and the people who had helped her along the way. Sarah also spent time preparing herself mentally for seeing her former classmates again. She practiced meditation techniques she had learned during her military training, exercises designed to maintain calm and focus even in stressful situations. She visualized various scenarios that might unfold at the reunion, preparing responses that would be professional and dignified regardless of how others chose to behave. One evening, Sarah called her mother to tell her about the reunion plans. Elena Martinez had worried constantly during Sarah's early years of military service, but she had gradually come to understand that her daughter had found her calling. When Sarah described her plan to bring the Apache helicopter to town, Elena was both excited and apprehensive. "Mija, are you sure about this?" Elena asked. "Those people hurt you so badly. Maybe it's better to just leave the past in the past." "I thought about that, Mom," Sarah replied. "But then I realized that hiding who I've become would be letting them win all over again. I'm not doing this to hurt anyone or to get revenge. I'm doing this to show that their opinion of me was wrong, that I was always capable of more than they realized. Just promise me you won't let them drag you back down to their level." "I promise, Mom. I'm not the same girl they remember. I won't be a victim anymore." As the reunion date approached, Sarah began receiving more text messages from her former classmates. Most were variations on the theme of mockery and condescension, but a few surprised her with their tone. Marcus Williams, who had been one of the quieter kids in their class, sent a message that simply said, "Looking forward to seeing how you're doing, Sarah. Hope life has been good to you." Even Jennifer Walsh seemed to be ramping up her campaign of anticipation. She posted on the reunion Facebook page that everyone should be sure to come because they were going to have some special surprises and that it would be a night to remember. Reading between the lines, Sarah suspected Jennifer was planning some sort of public humiliation for her. If only Jennifer knew what kind of surprise was actually in store for everyone. 2 days before the reunion, Sarah drove out to the airbase where her Apache was stationed. The helicopter had completed its maintenance check, and was in perfect condition for the flight to Westfield. Sarah ran through her pre-flight inspection with the same meticulous attention to detail she applied to every mission, checking every system and control. The Apache was a magnificent machine, a testament to American engineering and military capability. Armed with a 30mm automatic cannon, Hydra 70 rockets, and Hellfire missiles, it was designed to be the most advanced attack helicopter in the world. But, for Sarah, it was more than just a weapon of war. It was proof of her competence, her skill, and her value as a soldier and a person. Standing next to the helicopter in her flight suit, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the scared girl hiding in bathroom stalls to the confident pilot commanding one of the military's most sophisticated aircraft, the transformation still seemed almost impossible, even to her. She thought about the first time she had soloed in the Apache, the mixture of terror and exhilaration as she lifted off, and realized she was actually flying this incredible machine. She remembered her first combat mission, providing close air support for troops under fire, and the pride she had felt when the ground commander radioed his thanks for her assistance. Most of all, she thought about the respect she had earned from her fellow pilots and crew members. In the military, respect wasn't given freely. It was earned through competence, courage, and character. Sarah had proven herself in all three areas, rising through the ranks from enlisted soldier to warrant officer based purely on her merit and performance. The night before the reunion, Sarah laid out her dress uniform with the same precision she used for everything else in her military career. Each ribbon and medal was perfectly aligned, each piece of brass polished to a mirror shine. The uniform represented not just her personal achievements, but the honor and tradition of the United States Army. She looked at herself in the mirror, seeing the confident woman she had become. Her posture was straight and proud, her gaze steady and direct. This was not the posture of someone seeking approval or acceptance. This was the bearing of someone who knew her own worth and didn't need validation from others. Sarah's phone buzzed with another message from Jennifer Walsh. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow night. Hope you're ready for a blast from the past." Sarah typed back, "Looking forward to it, Jen. I think everyone's going to be very surprised." If only Jennifer knew how true that statement was. The class reject was about to make an entrance that none of them would ever forget. Sarah Martinez, Apache pilot and decorated veteran, was ready to show her former classmates exactly what she had become. The scared girl they remembered was gone forever, replaced by a warrior who commanded respect through her actions and achievements. Tomorrow would mark not just a reunion with her past, but a celebration of her transformation. Sarah was no longer running from who she used to be. She was proud of who she had become, and she was ready to share that pride with everyone who had counted her out. The helicopter waiting for her on the tarmac was more than just transportation. It was a symbol of everything she had accomplished and everything she represented. The reunion was less than 24 hours away, and Sarah Martinez was ready to fly into her future while putting her past firmly in its place. The class reject was about to become the class hero, and the transformation was going to change how everyone thought about second chances and human potential. As she prepared for bed, Sarah felt a calm confidence settle over her. Tomorrow would be a day of revelation, of truth, and of proving that sometimes the people you underestimate the most become the ones who achieve the greatest success. She was ready to show Westfield exactly what their former reject had become, and she suspected the demonstration would be one that no one in attendance would ever forget. The morning of the reunion dawned clear and bright, with perfect flying weather across the region. Sarah woke at her usual time and followed her standard pre-mission routine, despite the fact that this wasn't technically a military operation. She ate a light breakfast, reviewed her flight plan one final time, and conducted a thorough weather briefing. Every detail had to be perfect. At 0800 hours, Sarah arrived at the airbase and began her pre-flight inspection of the Apache. Her crew chief, Sergeant First Class Michael Torres, had ensured the helicopter was in pristine condition for the demonstration flight. Every surface gleamed, every system had been checked and double-checked, and the aircraft looked like it had just rolled out of the factory. "She's ready for anything, Chief," Torres said, using the informal title that acknowledged Sarah's rank and position. Fuel tanks are topped off, all systems green, and I've never seen her looking better. Thanks, Torres. This is a special day, and I want everything to be perfect. Roger that. Your hometown's lucky to get a look at what you've become. Sarah climbed into the cockpit and began her systems check, running through each procedure with the automatic precision that came from thousands of hours of flight time. The Apache responded to her touch like a well-trained partner, every control perfectly calibrated and ready for action. As she started the engines and felt the familiar vibration of the rotors spinning up, Sarah experienced the same thrill she had felt on her very first flight. The flight from the airbase to Westfield took exactly 43 minutes, following a route Sarah had plotted to showcase the Apache's capabilities while maintaining all safety protocols. As she approached the town where she had spent her miserable teenage years, Sarah couldn't help but think about the contrast between her departure and her return. She had left Westfield as a broken young woman with no prospects and no hope, riding a Greyhound bus to basic training with everything she owned in a single duffel bag. Now she was returning as the pilot of one of the most advanced military aircraft in the world, commanding respect and admiration wherever she went. The transformation was so complete that even she sometimes had trouble believing it was real. The Westfield airport came into view right on schedule, and Sarah could see that Dave Collins had been busy preparing for her arrival. A small crowd had already gathered near the terminal, including what looked like news crews and local officials. Sarah smiled as she began her approach, knowing that word of her demonstration had spread throughout the community. She brought the Apache down with textbook precision, settling onto the designated landing area with barely a bump. As the rotors wound down and the engines fell silent, Sarah could see people approaching the aircraft with expressions of awe and curiosity. For most of them, this was probably their first close look at a military attack helicopter, and the Apache was certainly an impressive sight. Sarah shut down all systems and secured the aircraft before removing her flight helmet and climbing down from the cockpit. She was immediately approached by Dave Collins and several other airport officials, all of whom seemed genuinely excited about her visit. "Chief Martinez, welcome home," Dave said, extending his hand. "That was one hell of an arrival. I don't think anyone in Westfield has ever seen anything like it." "Thank you for arranging all this," Sarah replied, looking around at the growing crowd. "I hope the community enjoys getting to see the Apache up close." Mary Rodriguez from the local newspaper pushed forward with her photographer in tow. "Chief Martinez, can we get some photos of you with the helicopter? Our readers are going to love this story." For the next hour, Sarah posed for photographs and answered questions about her military career, her training as a pilot, and her decision to bring the Apache home to Westfield. She was careful to keep her responses professional and positive, focusing on her pride in serving her country rather than dwelling on her difficult past. "What was it like growing up in Westfield?" Mary asked during their interview. "High school was challenging for me," Sarah replied diplomatically. "I was a quiet kid who didn't really fit in with the popular crowd. But those experiences taught me resilience and determination, qualities that served me well in my military career." "Are you excited about seeing your former classmates tonight?" Sarah smiled. "I'm looking forward to showing them what I've been up to for the past 10 years. I think some of them might be surprised." As the afternoon progressed, more and more people arrived to see the Apache demonstration. Local families brought their children to get photos with the helicopter. Veterans from previous conflicts stopped by to share their own military experiences, and community leaders expressed their pride in having a hometown hero return in such spectacular fashion. Sarah noticed that several people her own age had joined the crowd, people she recognized from high school, but who clearly didn't recognize her. She overheard one woman telling her husband, "I think I went to school with her, but she looks so different. I can't believe little Sarah Martinez became a helicopter pilot." Around 4 o'clock, Sarah began preparing for the next phase of her plan. The reunion wasn't scheduled to begin until 7 that evening, but she wanted to make sure everything was coordinated perfectly. She called Colonel Harrison to report that the demonstration was proceeding flawlessly and that community response had been overwhelmingly positive. "Outstanding work, Martinez," Harrison said. "You're making the Army look good out there. How's the reunion preparation going?" "Everything's on schedule, sir. I think my classmates are going to be very surprised when they learn what I've been doing with my life." I bet they are. Remember, you're representing all of us tonight. Show them what a real soldier looks like. Roger that, sir. I won't let the uniform down. As the crowd began to thin out in the late afternoon, Sarah made final preparations for her evening appearance. She had reserved a room at the airport hotel where she could change into her dress uniform and make final adjustments to her appearance. The plan was to arrive at the reunion venue in a taxi, looking like any other guest, before revealing her true identity and profession. Sarah looked at herself in the hotel mirror, adjusting the ribbons and decorations on her dress uniform one final time. The reflection showed a confident, accomplished woman who bore little resemblance to the frightened teenager her classmates remembered. Her posture was erect and military, her gaze direct and unwavering, and her bearing suggested someone accustomed to command and respect. The transformation wasn't just physical, though that was certainly dramatic. Sarah had grown into her features, carrying herself with the confidence that came from knowing her own capabilities and worth. Her dark hair was styled in a regulation but flattering manner, and her uniform fit perfectly, tailored to showcase both her professionalism and her pride in her service. But the real change was in her eyes. Where once there had been fear and uncertainty, now there was calm assurance. Where once there had been desperate hope for acceptance, now there was quiet confidence in her own achievements. Sarah Martinez had become exactly the kind of person she had once dreamed of being, and no amount of high school cruelty could diminish that accomplishment. The taxi arrived at precisely 1900 hours, and Sarah made the 20-minute drive to the Marriott Hotel where the reunion was being held. As they pulled up to the entrance, she could see her former classmates arriving in groups, many of them looking remarkably similar to how they had appeared in high school. The popular kids were still traveling in packs, the athletes still carried themselves with the same swagger, and the party crowd was already showing signs of pre-reunion celebration. Sarah paid the taxi driver and walked through the hotel entrance, drawing curious glances from people who couldn't quite place her. She checked in with the reunion registration table, where a volunteer she didn't recognize handed her a name tag and reunion packet. Sarah Martinez, the volunteer said, checking her list. I don't think we've heard from you until recently. It's great that you could make it. I've been traveling quite a bit for work, Sarah replied. But I wouldn't miss this for anything. The reunion was being held in the hotel's main ballroom, which had been decorated with school colors and memorabilia from their graduating year. As Sarah entered the room, she was struck by how small it seemed compared to her memories. Everything felt diminished somehow, less impressive than it had when she was 18 and intimidated by her surroundings. She moved through the crowd slowly, observing her former classmates and listening to their conversations. Most were discussing careers, marriages, children, and the various achievements of the past decade. Sarah noticed that many of the same social dynamics from high school were still in play. The popular crowd dominated the center of the room, while the quieter students clustered around the edges. Jennifer Walsh was holding court near the bar, surrounded by her usual entourage of former cheerleaders and popular girls. She looked older but still maintained the perfectly groomed appearance that had defined her in high school. Sarah could hear fragments of their conversation, mostly gossip about absent classmates and speculation about who had succeeded or failed since graduation. I heard Tommy Peterson is a millionaire now, one of Jennifer's friends was saying. Apparently, he started some tech company that got bought out by Google. Good for him, Jennifer replied. At least someone from our class made something of themselves. I was starting to worry we were all going to end up ordinary. Sarah smiled at the irony. Jennifer had no idea that the person she considered the least likely to succeed was standing less than 20 feet away, wearing the uniform of an elite military pilot. The conversation continued, with various classmates speculating about Sarah's absence and what had become of the class reject. I bet she's working at McDonald's or something, someone suggested. Girls like that don't usually amount to much. Maybe she's too embarrassed to show her face, another voice chimed in. I mean, what would she even say to people like us? Sarah had heard enough. She walked over to the registration table and asked to speak with the reunion committee chairperson. The volunteer pointed toward Jennifer Walsh, and Sarah began making her way across the room. As she approached the group, conversations gradually died down as people tried to figure out who this impressive-looking woman in military uniform might be. Excuse me, Sarah said, her voice carrying the authority that came from years of commanding soldiers in combat situations. "I'm looking for Jennifer Walsh. I believe she's the reunion committee chair." Jennifer turned around with her characteristic perfect smile, clearly expecting to greet some distinguished guest or perhaps a military representative there for ceremonial purposes. Her expression changed dramatically when she found herself face to face with Sarah Martinez, though it took her several seconds to make the connection between the confident woman in uniform and the scared girl she remembered from high school. "Sarah?" Jennifer's voice was barely a whisper. "Sarah Martinez? Is that really you?" "Hello, Jennifer. Thank you for organizing such a wonderful reunion. I'm sorry I'm a little late, but I was coordinating a community demonstration with my aircraft." "Your aircraft?" Jennifer's confusion was evident in her voice and expression. "Yes, my Apache helicopter. We did a static display at the airport this afternoon for local families. It was very well received." The conversation around them had completely stopped as other classmates realized what was happening. Sarah could see recognition dawning on face after face as people connected the confident military officer standing before them with the girl they had tormented a decade earlier. "You're a soldier?" someone asked from the crowd. "Army aviator," Sarah corrected. "Chief Warrant Officer Sarah Martinez, currently assigned to the 1st Attack Reconnaissance Battalion. I pilot AH-64 Apache helicopters." The silence that followed was profound. Sarah could practically see the mental recalculations happening as her former classmates tried to reconcile their memories of the class reject with the reality of the accomplished woman standing before them. The scared girl who had eaten lunch alone in bathroom stalls had become a military pilot, commanding one of the most advanced aircraft in the world. Jennifer was the first to recover her composure, though her usual confidence was notably shaken. That's incredible, Sarah. We had no idea. You look so different." "Military service has a way of changing people," Sarah replied calmly. "It teaches you to find strength you didn't know you had, and to become more than you ever thought possible." As word spread through the ballroom, more and more classmates approached to congratulate Sarah on her achievements. Many seemed genuinely impressed and happy for her success, but Sarah could see the calculating looks in some eyes as former bullies tried to rewrite history and position themselves as having always been supportive. Marcus Williams, the quiet classmate who had sent her the kind message, pushed through the crowd with a genuine smile. "Sarah, this is amazing. I always knew you had something special in you. Congratulations on everything you've accomplished." "Thank you, Marcus. That means a lot coming from you." As the evening progressed, Sarah found herself at the center of attention in a way that would have terrified her 18-year-old self. But now she handled the attention with grace and confidence, sharing stories of her military service and the opportunities it had provided her. She spoke about the importance of education, discipline, and service to something greater than oneself. Several of her classmates asked about her path from high school to military service, and Sarah shared Robert Chen's story and the impact he had made on her life. She talked about the importance of mentors and second chances, and how sometimes the worst experiences in life could become the catalyst for the greatest transformations. "I won't pretend that high school was easy for me," Sarah said during an impromptu speech that someone had requested. "Many of you probably remember that I struggled to fit in, that I was often the target of jokes and pranks. But those experiences taught me something valuable. They taught me that other people's opinions don't define my worth or limit my potential." The room was completely quiet now, with everyone hanging on her words. Sarah could see emotions ranging from admiration to shame on the faces around her, as people confronted the reality of how they had treated her and what she had become despite their cruelty. "I'm not standing here tonight to make anyone feel bad about the past," Sarah continued. "I'm here to show that transformation is possible, that where you start doesn't determine where you finish. The scared girl you remember is gone, replaced by someone who has found purpose and meaning through service to her country." Jennifer Walsh was noticeably quiet throughout Sarah's impromptu speech, her usual social dominance completely undermined by the presence of someone who had achieved something far more impressive than anything Jennifer had accomplished. The dynamic had shifted completely. Sarah was now the center of attention and respect, while Jennifer and her followers found themselves relegated to the sidelines. As the evening wound down, many classmates approached Sarah individually to apologize for their past behavior and to express their admiration for her achievements. Some of the apologies seemed genuine, while others felt more like attempts to associate themselves with her success. Sarah accepted them all graciously, demonstrating the kind of class and character that her military service had instilled in her. But the real revelation was yet to come. Sarah had saved the biggest surprise for the end of the evening, and she could hardly wait to see the reactions when her former tormentors learned exactly what kind of power and capability their former victim now possessed. The Apache helicopter waiting at the airport was more than just transportation. It was a symbol of her complete transformation from victim to warrior. The class reject had become someone none of them could have imagined, and the full scope of her transformation was about to become clear to everyone in attendance. Sarah Martinez was no longer someone to be pitied or mocked. She was someone to be respected and admired, and she had the aircraft and credentials to prove it. As the reunion began winding down around 10 o'clock, Sarah noticed that Jennifer Walsh was trying to regain some measure of control over the evening's narrative. Despite being clearly shaken by Sarah's transformation, Jennifer's competitive nature wouldn't allow her to simply accept that her former victim had achieved something remarkable. She began working the room, whispering to her old friends, and occasionally shooting glances in Sarah's direction. Sarah could sense that Jennifer was planning something, probably a final attempt to diminish her accomplishments or reassert her own social dominance. It was exactly the kind of petty behavior Sarah had expected, and she was prepared for it. In fact, she was counting on it. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jennifer announced, moving toward the small stage area where a microphone had been set up for speeches. "Before we wrap up this wonderful evening, I thought it might be fun to revisit some of our favorite memories from high school." Sarah's intuition proved correct. Jennifer was clearly planning to embarrass her by bringing up humiliating moments from their shared past, probably hoping to diminish the impact of Sarah's military achievements by reminding everyone of the scared girl they had tormented. "As many of you know," Jennifer continued, her voice taking on the familiar tone of mock sweetness that Sarah remembered all too well, "our class had some very colorful characters. Some of us were leaders, some were followers, and some—" She paused for effect, looking directly at Sarah. "Well, some of us were just trying to survive." The room grew uncomfortable as people realized what Jennifer was attempting to do. Several classmates shot disapproving looks in her direction, but Jennifer pressed on, apparently unable to accept that her former victim had achieved something she never could. "I think it's wonderful that everyone has found their place in the world," Jennifer said, her tone becoming more pointed. "Though I have to admit, I'm curious about some of the more dramatic transformations we've seen tonight. I mean, military service is certainly admirable, but let's not forget where we all came from." Sarah could see the trap being set. Jennifer was trying to minimize her accomplishments by suggesting that her military career was somehow less impressive than civilian achievements, or that her past as an outcast made her current success less meaningful. It was the same kind of psychological manipulation Jennifer had used in high school, just dressed up in more sophisticated language. But Sarah had anticipated exactly this scenario, and she was ready with a response that would end Jennifer's games once and for all. "You know what, Jennifer," Sarah said, standing up and walking toward the stage. "You're absolutely right. We should remember where we came from and how far we've traveled. In fact, I think this would be a perfect time to show everyone exactly what military service has meant to me." Sarah took the microphone from Jennifer's surprised hands and turned to address the room. "Jennifer mentioned that it's important not to forget our roots, and I couldn't agree more. 10 years ago, I left Westfield as someone most of you considered a failure. I was the girl who ate lunch alone, who was the target of pranks and jokes, who seemed destined for a life of mediocrity at best." The room was completely silent now, with everyone focused on Sarah's words. Even Jennifer seemed uncertain about where this was heading, though her expression suggested she was beginning to realize she had made a serious miscalculation. "But sometimes," Sarah continued, "the people you underestimate the most become the ones who achieve the greatest success. Sometimes the quiet girl hiding in the bathroom stalls becomes the soldier who saves lives in combat zones. Sometimes the class reject becomes the pilot who commands respect and admiration from colleagues around the world." Sarah paused and looked directly at Jennifer. "You invited me here tonight expecting to find the same broken girl you remembered," someone you could mock and humiliate for your entertainment. Instead, you found Chief Warrant Officer Sarah Martinez, Apache pilot and decorated veteran. But you still haven't grasped the full scope of what that means. Sarah pulled out her phone and made a quick call. Torres, this is Chief Martinez. Execute Phase 2 of our demonstration plan. ETA 5 minutes to the hotel. She ended the call and smiled at the confused faces around her. You see, I didn't come to this reunion alone tonight. I brought a few friends with me, specifically my flight crew and my Apache helicopter. They've been standing by at the airport, waiting for my signal. The sound of helicopter rotors could already be heard in the distance, growing louder by the second. Sarah had coordinated with local authorities and the hotel management earlier that day to arrange for a nighttime flyover demonstration, though she had kept the timing deliberately vague. The Apache was approaching the hotel right on schedule. That sound you're hearing, Sarah said as the rotor noise grew more intense, is an AH-64 Apache attack helicopter approaching our location. It's equipped with a 30mm automatic cannon, Hydra 70 rockets, and Hellfire missiles. It's capable of engaging multiple targets simultaneously at ranges exceeding 5 miles, and it represents the most advanced attack helicopter technology in the world. The lights in the ballroom dimmed as the Apache passed directly overhead, its searchlights briefly illuminating the windows. The sound was overwhelming, a deep thrumming that seemed to shake the entire building. Several people moved to the windows to catch a glimpse of the aircraft, their voices filled with awe and excitement. More importantly, Sarah continued as the helicopter made another pass. That aircraft represents my office, my responsibility, and my authority as a United States Army pilot. When I'm in that cockpit, I have the power to rain hell from the sky or to provide life-saving medical evacuation. I've used both capabilities during combat deployments in Afghanistan and Syria. Jennifer had gone completely pale, finally, understanding the full implications of Sarah's transformation. The scared girl she had tormented had become someone who commanded genuine power and respect, someone whose skills and authority far exceeded anything Jennifer had achieved in her comfortable civilian life. I want everyone to understand something, Sarah said as the Apache settled into a hover pattern above the hotel. I didn't become a pilot to impress former classmates or to get revenge on people who treated me badly. I became a pilot because I found something I was good at, something that gave my life meaning and purpose. The military taught me that my worth isn't determined by other people's opinions. It's determined by my actions, my character, and my commitment to something greater than myself. The helicopter's PA system crackled to life as Sergeant Torres spoke from the aircraft. Chief Martinez, this is Apache 77. We have eyes on your location and are standing by for further instructions. Sarah keyed her radio and responded, Apache 77, this is Chief Martinez. Mission complete. Return to base and secure the aircraft. Outstanding work tonight. Roger that, Chief. See you back at the barn. As the Apache departed and the sound of rotors faded into the distance, the ballroom remained completely silent. Sarah's former classmates stared at her with expressions ranging from awe to disbelief, finally, comprehending the magnitude of her transformation. The girl they had dismissed as worthless had become someone who commanded million-dollar military hardware and the respect of professional soldiers. I know some of you are probably wondering why I arranged this demonstration, Sarah said, breaking the silence. It wasn't to show off or to make anyone feel small. It was to illustrate a simple truth, that our potential isn't limited by other people's expectations or by the circumstances we start with. 10 years ago, none of you would have believed that the class reject could become a military pilot. But here I am. Sarah looked around the room, making eye contact with as many people as possible. I'm sharing this with you because I want you to remember that transformation is always possible for yourselves and for others. The next time you're tempted to write someone off because they don't fit your expectations or because they've made mistakes, remember that you might be looking at a future hero, leader, or success story. Jennifer finally found her voice, though it was considerably smaller than her usual confident tone. Sarah, I had no idea. What you've accomplished is incredible. Thank you, Jennifer. And I want you to know that I don't hold grudges about high school. We were all young and still figuring out who we were. But I do hope that tonight has given everyone something to think about regarding how we treat others and what we assume about their potential. As the evening came to an end, Sarah was surrounded by classmates wanting to learn more about her military career, her deployment experiences, and her path from high school outcast to elite aviator. Many expressed genuine admiration and respect for her achievements, while others seemed humbled by the realization of how wrong their assumptions had been. Marcus Williams approached her as people began to leave. "Sarah, that was incredible. Not just the helicopter demonstration, but the way you handled everything tonight. You could have used this opportunity to humiliate people who treated you badly, but instead you turned it into a lesson about potential and transformation." "That's what good leaders do," Sarah replied. "They use their power to inspire and educate, not to seek revenge or settle old scores. I learned that from some excellent mentors during my military career." As Sarah prepared to leave the reunion, she was approached by several younger hotel staff members who had witnessed the helicopter demonstration. Word had spread throughout the hotel about the former local girl who had returned as a military pilot, and many employees wanted to meet her and express their admiration. "Ma'am," said a young woman who couldn't have been much older than Sarah was when she left for basic training, "I just wanted to say thank you for showing us what's possible. I'm working here to save money for college, and sometimes I wonder if I'll ever amount to anything. Seeing what you've accomplished gives me hope." Sarah smiled and took the young woman's hand. "What's your name?" "Jessica, ma'am. Jessica Rodriguez." "Jessica, let me tell you something important. Where you work doesn't define your worth, and where you start doesn't determine where you finish. I was cleaning floors and stocking shelves when I decided to change my life. The most important thing is to never stop believing in your own potential and to be ready to work harder than anyone else to achieve your dreams." "Yes, ma'am. I'll remember that." As Sarah finally left the hotel and got into her taxi for the ride back to the airport, she reflected on the evening's events. The reunion had gone exactly as she had hoped, not as an exercise in revenge, but as a demonstration of transformation and possibility. She had proven her point without diminishing herself or unnecessarily humiliating others. The taxi ride to the airport gave her time to process the emotions of the evening. Seeing her former classmates had brought back memories of pain and isolation, but those memories no longer had power over her. She had faced her past from a position of strength and accomplishment, proving to herself as much as to others that she had truly moved beyond those difficult years. At the airport, Sarah found Torres and her flight crew conducting post-flight checks on the Apache. They had all volunteered to participate in the reunion demonstration, understanding that it was important to their pilot and commander. Military personnel took care of each other, especially when it came to personal milestones and significant moments. "How'd it go, Chief?" Torres asked as Sarah approached the aircraft. "Better than I hoped, Sergeant. Thank you for making this possible. The demonstration was flawless." "Our pleasure, ma'am. It's not often we get to show off for a good cause. From what we saw through the night vision, you had quite an audience up there." Sarah smiled as she began her own post-flight inspection of the helicopter. The Apache had performed perfectly, just as it always did when properly maintained and operated. The aircraft was more than just a machine to her. It was a partner, a symbol of her achievements, and proof of her competence and skill. As she completed her inspection and secured the aircraft for the night, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the scared teenager boarding a bus to basic training to the confident pilot commanding respect from peers and superiors alike, the transformation had been complete and profound. The class reject no longer existed. In her place stood Chief Warrant Officer Sarah Martinez, a woman who had found her calling in military service and had proven that determination and hard work could overcome any obstacle. She had faced her past with dignity and grace, demonstrating that success was the best response to those who had doubted her potential. Tomorrow, Sarah would fly back to her base and resume her military duties. She would continue training, continue serving her country, and continue proving that the scared girl from Westfield High School had become something extraordinary. The reunion was behind her now, but the lessons it had provided would stay with her forever. She had shown her former classmates what was possible when someone refused to accept limitations imposed by others. More importantly, She had shown herself that she had truly moved beyond the pain of her past and could face any challenge with confidence and strength. The Apache helicopter sitting silently on the tarmac was proof of her journey, but the real transformation had happened in her heart and mind. Sarah Martinez had attended her 10-year reunion not as the class reject seeking acceptance, but as a decorated veteran and elite pilot sharing her success with those who had once written her off. The scared girl was gone forever, replaced by a warrior who commanded respect through her actions and achievements. The transformation was complete, and the future held unlimited possibilities for the woman who had refused to let her past define her destiny. As she walked away from the Apache and toward her hotel room, Sarah felt a profound sense of closure and accomplishment. She had faced her demons and emerged victorious, not through revenge or bitterness, but through the simple power of transformation and achievement. The class reject had become the class inspiration, proving that sometimes the greatest victories come not from defeating others, but from becoming the best possible version of yourself. The reunion was over, but the story of Sarah Martinez was just beginning. She had shown everyone what was possible when someone refused to accept the limitations others tried to impose, and her example would inspire others to pursue their own transformations and achievements. The Apache pilot who had once been the class reject was now a role model for anyone who had ever been counted out or written off, proving that with determination, hard work, and the right opportunities, anyone could rise above their circumstances and achieve something extraordinary.